r/Nosleep. Posted by u/wildcardwildcherries. I'm volunteering at my old middle school. The job came with a very strange code of conduct. I went to a small private school from kindergarten all the way through 8th grade, joining the real world in time for high school. Despite how sheltered I was attending a small Lutheran school, I enjoyed my time there. I made some friends who I remain in touch with to this day, and was able to escape my sometimes rocky home life in favor of school and sports. To sum it up, my experience there was normal and pleasant for the most part, which only makes recent events more strange. My boyfriend and I recently moved into an apartment at the edge of town. We are close enough to the highway and a few restaurants to not feel isolated, but we also find ourselves buried in some sparse newer suburbs that creep into the surrounding woods. Our neighborhood also happens to be located not 2 miles away from my old school, which is how I got the idea to do some volunteering there. I recently graduated with a bachelor's degree in psychology. I plan to take the GRE and apply for some master's programs next cycle, so in the meantime I need extra experiences to pile onto my applications. That, coupled with my new close proximity to Fruits of the Spirit Lutheran School, brought me to the seemingly easy solution of returning there for some volunteer experience. Fat, wet snowflakes pelted my windshield on the day I pulled into the FTS parking lot. I wasn't sure what to expect. I hadn't set foot in the place in years. It was also a church that offered child care, but I stopped attending church long ago, and at only 24, I am happily childless. I marveled at how much the place had changed as I entered the now sleek glass front doors. My boots squeaked loudly on the fresh-looking marble floors as I tracked in snow, the sound reverberating loudly off of the familiar vaulted ceilings. At least some things were still familiar. I approached the busy-looking woman seated at the new reception desk that now stood between the lobby and the hallways lined with classrooms. She greeted me warmly and escorted me to the offices when I explained why I was there. The woman sitting in the office was less warm. "Julia," she sighed, sounding exasperated. "We don't need volunteers." "Lori." The receptionist, Julia, replied in a passive-aggressive sing-song tone. "She's an alumni." Lori looked mildly surprised as she turned her attention fully to me for the first time. "Are you now? How very interesting. I don't believe I've met an alumni your age yet." I smiled and shook her hand. That didn't exactly shock me. I didn't recognize Lori, and most of the staff still on the school's website were faces I recognized from my time at FTS. The school was small when it first started out, and they relied on primarily parents or family of students to fill in administrative positions. Sometimes even teaching positions. It was a tight-knit group, and Lori was likely newer. She was probably hired in the past couple of years as the school expanded. Principal Lucas left his office then, rounding the corner and locking eyes with me. He was a tall man. Even after entering adulthood I found myself tipping my chin back to meet his smiling eyes. I'm 5'10" now, tall for a girl, giving me a new appreciation for his stature. "Jules," he smiled, crinkling his eyes and making them look even more smiley. "I would recognize a former student anywhere. What a lovely woman you've grown into." I would have made no attempt to conceal my disgust for such a creepy comment had it come from anyone else. Principal Lucas was like a grandfather to me though, despite having gone years without seeing him. He was always more laid back than some of the teachers, less judgmental. Even as a child I picked up on it. He was patient with the students, even the most difficult ones. He commanded a quiet authority that I've always admired, and it seemed that no student or teacher was immune to it. His compliment didn't sit wrong with me. He said it with something akin to respect, almost pride. We caught up briefly, and Principal Lucas seemed more than happy to take my offer for extra help. In fact, it seemed like they actually really needed it, contrary to Lori's initial response. I told them about my part-time job at a hospital in the city, and agreed to help out for wherever they needed me on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Principal Lucas saw me out, handing me a Chine white folder as I left. "Here are a few odds and ends that may be useful. A directory, class schedules, and a map of the school. As you may have noticed, we've grown a bit since you were a student." He chuckled before continuing. "There's also a code of conduct in there that is very useful. You're on the staff side of things now. You may find it interesting to read before your first day." He stopped walking and met my eyes again. There it was. That quiet authority. His words didn't sound like a command, but his very energy made it clear that they were. "I'll see you then. I'm sure all of the teachers will be happy to see you again." He gave me one more crinkly-eyed smile before opening the door for me. Something about that white folder creeped me out. The silver emblem of a dove in flight gleamed on the front, and it stared at me from its place on the passenger seat as I drove home. There was something deep in my chest that I couldn't identify. Some sort of worry that sat unrealized. I chalked it up to having homework and immediately opened the folder when I had settled myself at the kitchen table. Better to get it over with. The directory and schedule were present as promised, along with a school map that was more complicated than I anticipated. I suppose FTS really did grow larger than I thought. When I attended, the gymnasium doubled as the church, and we had to stack chairs in front of the altar during sports games so that no wayward basketballs knocked over the crucifix. Looking at the map, I noticed that one of the large additions to the school was a west-facing wing, labeled church. Despite eventually leading to the rest of the school via what looked like a long hallway, this church wing boasted its own entrance and small parking lot. The code of conduct was even more surprising though. It wasn't really a code of conduct, so much as a set of rules. You know the ones. I truly enjoy reading the stories that involve a good set of innocuous and sometimes ominous rules. That is until I sat at my kitchen table this afternoon holding a set of my own. There was no part of me that thought this could be a joke. Principal Lucas had a good sense of humor, but pranks were never his thing. Even more alarming, some of these rules pulled at my childhood memories, granting me with hindsight that I sort of wish I didn't have. I'll stop beating around the bush and get right to it. Under a brief introduction welcoming me to the FTS staff, the list of rules were as follows. 1. If you are supervising or chaperoning a class, field trip, recess, or lunch, please show up no less than 15 minutes early. It is imperative the students not be left unsupervised for even a brief period of time. 2. Having a cell phone is not prohibited. It is actually encouraged, should you need to contact staff in another part of the school in the event of an emergency. We just ask that you keep your cellular devices on silent, and do not make any outgoing calls while on FTS grounds. Incoming calls and texts are okay. 3. If the weather is less than favorable, recess should be held in the gymnasium. There is sports equipment and games in the gym utility closet. You may obtain the key from Lori in the office should you need it. Knock 3 times on the door loudly before unlocking it, or the lock may stick. This goes for any locked door on the premises. Our locks are quite temperamental. 4. Prayer must be said every morning once the students arrive, and every afternoon before they leave the building. Should a student be late, he or she should be encouraged to lead a Bible reading during religion class, or say their own prayer during lunch. 5. Students may eat hot lunch, or bring their own. If any student appears to have an allergic reaction while eating hot lunch, bring them to Principal Lucas immediately. Do not call 911. Our staff is well equipped to handle the situation. Our cooks are well aware of any food allergies the students may have. Whatever is happening to the student is not due to allergies. 6. Only the more fit staff members will be asked to supervise recess. You have to be able to keep up with our high-energy students. Staff must have an 8-minute mile or better in order to qualify for recess supervision. 7. We are lucky enough to live in a beautiful wooded area. It is often tempting for students to wander off and explore the forest during outdoor recess. We have tied bright orange ribbons around a few trees to serve as boundary lines. We don't want to mar nature with a fence. Should any student wander past a boundary line, you should retrieve him or her immediately. Do not call his or her name, instead approach the student and lead them back in bounds. If at any point, even for just a second, you lose sight of a student that has wandered out of bounds, bring them to the office once you have retrieved them. Principal Lucas will handle it from there. 8. Recess is 30 minutes long. You will be provided with your own whistle, which you will use to signal the end of recess. Blow it in short, 2 blow increments. This will signal the students that they should line up to go inside. Make sure to do a head count as soon as they have lined up. If you have more students than you started with, lead everyone inside through the church entrance instead of the school entrance. See map. 9. Do your best to keep a close eye on all of the students at recess. If you see anything strange or out of the ordinary, blow your whistle loudly in rapid 3 blow increments. This tells the students that there is an emergency drill taking place and they should run inside as quickly as possible. You may skip the head count in this scenario, but do use the church entrance. See map. 10. If you see any movement beyond the boundaries, blow your whistle 3 times, see number 8. This should only happen once every month or so, but be vigilant. Sometimes it happens more frequently. 11. If another adult approaches you or any of the children claiming to be a parent or family member of a student during outdoor recess, blow your whistle 3 times and get everybody inside, see number 8. This individual is not who they say they are, even if you think you recognize them. 12. If another staff member shows up before or during recess and tells you they are there to assist you, ignore them. Wait until they are near a boundary line and blow your whistle 3 times, See number 8. We only ever have one recess supervisor at a time. 13. As you know, Fruit of the Spirit's school colors are silver and white. We encourage staff to demonstrate school spirit by wearing our colors as much as possible. Even a piece of silver jewelry will do. The Code of Conduct list wraps up with a little blurb about directing any questions to seasoned staff members and wishing me good luck. This is weird, right? Some of the rules make sense, but it seems to me that in every single one there is something off. What scares me the most though, are the memories that come flooding back as I read and reread the rules. I remember how all of my teachers, more often than not, wore silver and white. I remember how Principal Lucas wore a silver ring on each finger. I remember being late to lunch on a few occasions because I had to stay and say my morning prayer 3 times. I chalked it up to my teachers being overzealous religious freaks. What really bothers me though, is this: despite the church entrance being new, I definitely remember most of my recesses ending too soon, with 3 sharp bursts of a whistle cutting through the forest air.